Hi, Michelle. I'm going to start letting people in. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for being here. And
Yeah.
it last night went till about 7:20. Les Lachonic asked a whole bunch of questions, like everything that was in that letter he sent. So, we'll see. We'll see how many people show up, but I don't think it's going to be much longer than an hour, and you just do the best you can. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and Michelle, I'll make you the co-host.
Okay. So how do I let people in? I've never done that before.
So you'll see, like can you see me doing it now? So if you click on participants down at the bottom, then you'll see a list and you'll see, so I'm going to admit Savannah and.
Well, I don't see the
comes
list.
up.
It just says 10 people. Invite.
Does it, so you don't see, well, let's see if somebody else comes up in the waiting room, because I've just admitted everybody. But so click on participants, and then a list of people comes up on the side of your screen.
Okay. Yeah.
There.
Okay. So if someone wants to come in, I just say invite.
No, admit.
Oh, admit.
Yeah. If somebody else comes, we'll give people. It's not quite right. So
where's admit?
Well, it has to be. They have to not be admitted. So it's only 11:59. I'm sure somebody else will come in the next minute or two, and I can show you.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We'll just wait. Thanks for getting here early, everyone. So we'll wait until 12:01 to start. Okay. Because that feels fair.
Who is Matt F?
That's Matt Franz. He's the president of the Friends of the Library.
Oh, okay. This is Matt F. So. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so now Jamie Donta is in the waiting room. Do you see that in your list of participants?
Yes.
All right, and if you hover next to her name.
Well, it doesn't say that. It just says waiting room 1. Oh yeah, there it is. I hover. Yeah, admit.
Now click admit.
Got it.
That lets her in.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yep.
All right. Let's see if there she. Okay, that's good. Good. Hi, Jamie. Okay. All right. So now Jen Davies is in the waiting room. Do you see that? And then Penny Kim.
Let's see. Yes.
And you can click admit all. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it didn't happen with Penny. Here she goes.
All right, there. I just did it. Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right, we'll let Penny get in. It's still not quite 12:01, but this is a much bigger group than we had last night. Which is good. It's good. Friday at noon is a good time to have a meeting.
Oh, Tim Logan's here too. I just let Tim up there.
Lunch. Did you think I was serving lunch? So okay. Okay, good. All right, so it's 12:01. So I'm going to look, see, all right, people are looking for lunch.
That would be a good service.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I want to show you the small library pilot project website. So this is just mnsphere.org, our library website. And over here on the side, well, so if you just scroll down, you can see here's small library project, pilot project. And if you click on that, it brings you right to the page. But then over here on the sidebar, or if you're on a phone in that little hamburger menu, you click on small library pilot, and it brings you to this page. And I try to update this as timely as I can. So the first thing on it, well, so here, this link to this questions and answers about the small library pilot project. This is a document that the trustees prepared, and we posted after their meeting earlier this week. So this has pages and pages of questions and answers about the project. And then I've got the list of videos and recordings from meetings and tours. And down here at the bottom, so these are in chronological order. And so down here at the bottom is the community input session that we had last night. So if you click on that, it brings you to that recording. And this is that same questions and answers that's posted above. Somebody said they couldn't find it, so I thought I'd put it in two places. And then these are the drafts of the building program. And they're in reverse chronological order because I've just been putting the newest one on top. And then this morning I uploaded the reports from the site work that we've had done. So those are all here. And then this is the list of responses from the wish tree. And this is a great PowerPoint presentation about the costs of the new library. And then these are older documents. So I just wanted to share that with you as people are coming in. And then I just want to sort of talk a tiny bit about the building program and how, Kat, do you have a question?
I do. I'm looking at I clicked on the building program link on that thing just now, and the formatting is all messed up and it's kind of unreadable at the top on the table of contents. And I just wanted to call that to your attention. I don't know if it's the same for you. Maybe it's my computer, but there it is. That's all.
Okay. Alrighty. So when I look at it, of course, it looks right, but I will go and look at it on another computer that isn't connected to my Google account and see. Thank you for that feedback. I haven't heard that from anyone else. Okay.
Another question.
Okay.
When looking at the drafts, which I really haven't done because I've been attending the meetings, so far I haven't been reading through the drafts. Is it going to be clear how they differ, like what changes were made so that we don't have to carefully compare one to the next? Or is there a simple way to figure that out?
There aren't very many differences. It's so the first, from draft 1 to draft 2, it was really grammar and, it was very, very small changes.
Okay.
And then draft 2 had the answers to some questions that weren't in draft 1. So the questions were there, but there were big blank spaces. And then draft 3 has the question, had one last question inserted. So there was a blank space, and draft 3 has the answer. And draft 3 has some photos. And then it really is at this point typos and tiny language choices. Sometimes we found that we used the same word over and over again. And so we, took out some of those and things like that. So there aren't big changes. The way we worked on this is that we answered questions and we edited those questions before we put them into this format. So things got, edited before they even got here. So there's not a lot of changes.
Okay. All right.
And then if there are changes to the program areas, there will be some small square footage changes to the program areas. And we're going to move the pavilion and the outdoor space, for draft 4, and then we'll have an explanation of that change either in the document or outside the document. Jeannie, we are looking at the small library web page, and I will go ahead and share it again. And let's see. And so if you go to our website and then click on Small Library Pilot Project, so if you go to mnsphere.org and click on Small Library Pilot Project, it brings you to this page, which has recordings of tours and previous meetings and the building program and drafts, and then lots of other information. And good, thank you, Jen, for putting in that link. So I'm going to stop the share. So what we're mostly here to talk about today is the building program, because that's the part of this process that we're at right now. And so I just wanted to talk a tiny bit about how we came up with this building program. And, and mostly the concern about the building program is, how do we plan those program areas, which then get assigned square footage, which then result in, then when you combine them all, you come up with, how big a library will end up being. So we think about the kinds of things we want to do in a library, and the things that are going to be in the spaces. So how many books, what kind of furniture, what kind of equipment, what will the spaces be used for? And then what are people asking for? And what are the needs of a library? What needs do a library in Shutesbury need to meet based on usage data, needs expressed by the community, library trends, and feedback from librarians and other communities about what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And then you take all of that data and you try and figure out, each of the spaces. So, and when we were going through these spaces in the last few weeks, we had meetings where I, showed specific examples for each of the program areas. And if people have questions about specific areas, I can do that again. But I've been using all of this data to, based on our current usage and our usage before the pandemic, because our current usage is kind of hampered by the pandemic. I'm going to stop. I think, am I sharing my screen? I'm going to just change my view. Okay, that's better. And that's how we came up with the square footage for the different sections. And then we got feedback from the MBLC, and that's why it's a little bit in flux right now, because in some areas I had too much furniture for the space that I had allowed. So I downsized, I took out some of the furniture. And then in other areas, in the adult program area, the adult collections area, I had allowed 800 square feet for the collection because I was hoping for efficiencies by having some of the shelving units against the wall. But then the Board of Library Commissioners reminded me that if an aisle is a dead end, the space between the aisles has to be 5 feet wide in order to be ADA compliant, so a wheelchair can turn around. So you don't end up saving space that way. You end up needing more space. So, so I've had to increase that particular space. So, so anyway, so I'm redoing those program areas and we'll have that information, before the trustee meeting on Sunday. But this meeting is really for you to give us input and for us to keep track. It's being recorded. And Michelle Regan-Ladd, who's a trustee, is taking notes. So I will take your questions and comments now. So if you raise your hand, I'll call on people in the order that they've raised hands. Okay. Gail, were you trying to say something? Oh, so Kat, you have your hand up.
I was wondering, Marianne, if the process of ultimately the process of determining the square footage is a simple additive thing where you take each one of the program areas and add them together, or if you envision that there might be some overlapping and space sharing that would result in the saving of some square feet.
So here's how it works as best I understand it. So you take each of the areas and you describe them and you figure out what they need, and then you add it all up. And then you have to add in space for things like corridors and walls and things like the telecom closet and those places that sort of exist but aren't really program areas that people will be using. And you add that 30, so you add 30% for those kind of spaces.
Mhm.
Now, this is going to be a small library that isn't going to have a lot of corridors and things like that, and interior walls separating spaces.
Oh.
And spaces will flow into each other. They'll be separated more by furnishing and shelving than actual, walls and things like that. But there'll be some of that, some partial walls and things. And with that 30%, there's room for efficiencies. But I do think that there will be, a certain amount of space dedicated to the different sort of program areas or use areas within the library.
Mhm.
Okay, does that
Okay.
make sense? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, Carolyn, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick comment. It's my understanding that you've been sort of keeping that idea in mind while you were planning anyway, because for example, with the meeting room, you were hoping to have gallery space, and that's the same space. And, I'm sure that you're looking out for any possible opportunities to combine functions anyway already.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So, it may be possible that there are things that you've already done that are not apparent when we're talking about it now, because you've already thought about them and figured out those combinations. I just want to give you that prompt in case there are other things that you could bring up.
Right. So that's right. So in the children's room, that's the story time will happen right in the children's room, because it'll be the children's play space will also be the children's story time space. And it'll be a place where families might plan to meet after school or on a weekday morning, when we're open, and meet informally. So it would be a gathering space that we wouldn't call it the family gathering space, but it would just be this natural space that things like that would happen. So yes, Carolyn, that's right. Okay.
Thank you.
And then those, the small study space would be a tutoring space and a study space and a small meeting space and a teleconferencing space. So,
Right.
yeah. Okay, good. Leslie, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I have a process question to start with, and I have some other questions, but I'll just like to ask the process question and then kind of let other people talk, as I spoke quite a bit last night. From what I understand, in the Q&A, once the draft is submitted on Monday, residents can continue to review the draft, which is going to be draft number 4.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it might be draft number 5.
Okay, fair enough. And the Q&A says once it's submitted, people can continue to review and offer input for several weeks. And I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you had said that would probably be up until the middle of November. Could you?
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate.
Okay, that was my first question. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. Anybody else? Penny?
So when is the choice made? What's the date?
The choice for what? For the grant?
Between
Okay,
the,
so so the final grant application is due December 3rd. And then I think by the end of January or early February, they will select a project.
okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, and Kat, did you have a question?
Yes, it's also a process question. It's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this building program document isn't the beginning or isn't the end of a process. It's kind of the beginning of a process that if we get the grant, then we start working with an architect, and there's a whole lot more give and take and back and forth. That this isn't something that's going to be cast in stone even after that submission. The end of the comment period in mid-November. Am I right about that?
Definitely. It's so if we are offered the grant and then town meeting approves moving forward, funding it, funding our portion, then we would go into the design phase. And our goal is to write a building program that to write a well-informed building program that the architects can then meet our design needs based on the building program. So, so we're working very hard to make sure that we are articulating our needs so that it's clear and that we are really making, well-informed allowances for the furniture and the shelving and the collection capacity and people capacity that a library for Shutesbury will need, so that when we get to that design phase, the architects don't come back and say, you can't do this in this allotted space. So, and we did a pretty good job of that the last time. One of the things we have to think about, so we would like for this building to make its own power. So we want to have rooftop solar, so it makes its own power. And then we would like for this building to have power when the power goes out. So we want to have battery storage, and that's going to take some space. It's not, it's not a huge amount of space, but it's not no space at all. It's not likely that this building will have a basement because basements in New England are tricky things. You have to climate control them, and that costs money. And then they also have real accessibility issues. So we need to, plan space for that battery storage in the program of the building. And so we're trying to make sure that we describe all of that and allow for all of that so that we aren't hit with surprises later. So we're trying to come up with a ballpark gross square footage so that when we do go into a design phase, the architects can design a building that meets our program requirements. Okay.
And I'm assuming that process with the architects is a collaborative process. I mean, we don't just get one
Absolutely.
shot where they come back and say, here's your design, and that's it. I mean, we can
Right.
say, let's
Yeah.
negotiate.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to just add a comment based on some things that I've been hearing recently, and that is some people seem to be prepared to spend town money, which is our money, on other projects that would aid us in resiliency, but they don't want to see them in the library. And I wonder, why not in the library? If we're going to have a shiny new building, which I hope we are, and the state is going to pick up a really large portion of the tab, why wouldn't we want to do it there rather than, start fresh someplace else? That's just out there for people to think about.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So you don't want a response, you just want to say that?
That's right. I'm just
Okay.
putting that out there. It's a rhetorical question.
Okay, great, thank you. So there have been some things in the chat that I just want to read out loud, if I can. Let's see. And my chat is really weird. So a couple of people have said they agree with you, Kat. And then, oh, I know where to look at the chat so I can actually read it.
I have a question. What does
okay.
aid in resiliency mean?
So resiliency, Kat's referring to climate resiliency. So this is a concern that's been coming up a lot in municipal government and in society because of, the very clear evident effects of climate change. We see, more extreme storms, and people have concerns about power outages. So Kate Sell, who is a library trustee who's not here today, is works for the Union of Concerned Scientists and in their climate change department. And she knows a lot about climate change. And so when we started talking about this, so we talk about resiliency, and there are studies done that show that towns or municipalities that have good social infrastructure fare better in times of crisis than communities that don't have good social infrastructure. And there's a sociologist, his name is Eric Kleinenberg, and he did a whole study. He didn't start out to discover that libraries foster community resiliency, but what he discovered was that places that have good public libraries are more resilient communities in times of crisis because people have a public sort of meeting place and a place to go to access services. So that's what, so that's sort of the big picture resiliency. And then resiliency is if the power is out for 8 days, like it was at 339 Pelham Hill Road in December of 2008, where does somebody go to get water? And where does somebody go to charge their device? And where does somebody go to get warm for a couple of hours during the day when you live in Shutesbury? And we had people going and paying $10 to take a shower at the gym, or not showering at all, or going to stay with friends, or going and staying in hotels. During that power outage, there were cots and blankets at town hall. And there was town staff available. I don't remember anybody actually taking town hall up on that. But during every power outage, there are people who either, if the library has power, there are people who come into the library to charge their devices, or people who sit outside the library and plug in to charge their devices. During lots of power outages, I run extension cords outside the window because there's just one outdoor outlet, and there's often need for more power than that. And so that's one kind of resiliency, like sort of that power outage resiliency. And then there's just resiliency of, so Massachusetts is supposed to have in 30 years, we'll have a climate that's more like North Carolina, where we have 100-degree days in the summertime. And that might not be 100% accurate, but I bet you I'm pretty close. So it was a while that I read a report, a while ago that I read a report, and I bet I'm really close. So it might be 100-degree days in the summer. And so what do people do who don't have air conditioning? So people all over the country already go to their public library. That's a public air-conditioned building when it's hot. I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this summer. I was actually helping my husband with his business, and it was 104 degrees 3 days in a row. And I went and sat in the Coeur d'Alene Public Library for 2 hours each day, and to take advantage of their air conditioning. So I'm a real live person who was suffering from the effects of climate change and used a public library to to alleviate the effects of climate change. So that's what resiliency is. Let's see. Let's see. So Jen Davies says that I love that, power when there's no power out. And one person agreed with Kat about climate resiliency and and emergency services, and another person disagreed, and then another person did agree. And that's it. So I think Carolyn, you had your hand up next, and then after that will be Tim. Carolyn, did you want to ask a question?
Marianne, Jeannie's hand was up before Tim.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, it doesn't seem like Carolyn's going to ask her question. Jeannie, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. And Carolyn, sorry if you are able to come off mute. Marianne, thank you so much for all of those points. I think that you've got it spot on, and citing the data, the projections, what we can expect, is something that we need to remind ourselves over and over again, that it's hard to imagine now. We have ice storms, we have power outages we deal with all the time, but some other very serious, real consequences that we'll be facing. And so forward thinking, not just in terms of resiliency of our community and how we can reduce those vulnerabilities and get through this together. I'm also thinking about how you mentioned solar capacity, that this is a real opportunity also to show low impact, low carbon lead design, and it doesn't have to be very expensive either. In fact, it's often more sustainable, more durable to build in a way that you're thinking on a longer time scale and incorporating what we could be facing in terms of extreme climate issues, both cold, hot, dry, humid, ice, all of the above. So I'm just wondering if in the design, if we have an opportunity later, or if it's at this point now that we do consider more of those design aspects and more material sourcing that will get us to carbon neutral, or the durableness, as well as being able to withstand some of these extreme events.
And so we have lots of language like that written into the program. And I'll send you the specific pages. And if you have any recommendations for better language or stronger language, have at it. But we're saying fossil fuel free energy systems and
Great.
durable, easy to maintain exterior and interior finishes, and there's some kind of language about insulation and and taking advantage of passive solar opportunities, whether planning to take advantage of longer daylight, and all of those different things. And I'll send you those specific page numbers in the plan so that you can look at it. And if you have any other recommendations, that would be great. And whether or not we go for LEED certification, we're trying to have it be a net zero building. I don't think we need any fancy plaques. The Board of Library Commissioners used to give a financial incentive to go for LEED certification, but since they're paying a higher percentage of the construction costs, they're only allowed by statute to pay 75% of the eligible costs, and that's what they're paying for this. So they can't give that LEED financial incentive for this project. But rooftop solar is an eligible cost in this project, and that wouldn't have been an eligible cost 10 years ago. So they won't pay for LEED certification, but they're going to pay 75% of the solar panels on the roof, which is great. So Tim, you were next.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Kat a little bit. And the question and the answers, question number 13 quotes the MLBC's, MBLC's interest in resiliency and to what extent that exists. So you might want to read that question through, and I think most of the trustees are focusing on what they mean by that. And I also wanted to say that this is a dynamic process for the town, but it's the first time the MBLC has done this particular style grant. So I think we're going to find that it's a bit of a dynamic process for them as well, that they'll be learning in this process. So a lot of the things will be reviewed and reviewed and reviewed and in flux throughout this process. So thank you.
Jen Davies, you had your hand up?
I lost your sound, Marianne. Did you say me?
Yes.
So I actually have a question for Leslie. What is it you disagree with there? Like, how can you disagree? But I don't understand that there's a thing. Are you disagreeing with the idea that the library should be a place that people could go to for some sort of relief, or that the point in itself is a bad point?
Thanks for asking. I was about to raise my hand because I seem to be the only person disagreeing so far. I don't disagree with the goal of having an energy efficient library, backup solar, carbon neutral. I think having a good functioning library will contribute to community, what was the term that you used, Marianne, resiliency in the long run, that there's, where there's good community infrastructure, there's better adaptation. But when we're talking about emergency shelters and framing in some way that the library will be an emergency shelter, again, no quarrel with people going there and cooling when it's really hot, going there and getting warm when their power is out. But the climate disasters that are ahead of us, I think are going to make that storm that Marianne was referring to in 2008 chump change. I mean, we were here, we lived here, and we survived without power for those 6 days as best we could. We ended up staying in a motel. But again, with the kind of challenges with climate change and infrastructure challenges, electricity, power, gas, to me, and I've said this in a letter, my first letter to the library director and the board of trustees, I think that the town has been remiss in not really looking at what it needs in terms of an emergency shelter. The library that we're talking about, although I disagree with the size of it at this point in time, but we do need a good functioning library. The library in no way, shape, or form can provide a kind of emergency shelter to deal with the kind of climate emergencies and power outages and what have you that we're looking at for the next 10, 20 years. And I think we're looking at, you know, a design lifetime for this library for 20 years. Adding on space to the existing library to provide more shelter for people doesn't make sense to me. And it seems to me that it's the town's obligation, the Board of Selectmen and other committees in town, to really take a hard look at what we really need for an emergency shelter. I hope I've tried to clarify my thinking on this.
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
I wasn't saying that they were exclusive.
And I am not hearing the library committee say they believe that the space needs to accommodate like housing for people during that time. I mean, what I'm hearing is some space that would allow people to come in and get some short-term relief, not setting up cots and being housing. I mean, am I mishearing that, or?
No, I mean, my point is, again, I'll repeat what I said before, is people being able to go to the library on hot days or when their heat is out and they need to be warm. I think that's totally appropriate, but it's not going to meet the long-term need of this community for a real emergency shelter.
Yeah, sure, but that shouldn't have an implication on what happens. Nobody's claiming that it is going to serve that long-term need or asking it to. I agree with you, absolutely. My husband worked on the fire department for 20 years. Like, I'm well aware of the problems that people are facing also, but that's an issue for the town to deal with, and perhaps they are or aren't. I'm not caught up with that, but I don't think that necessarily or in any way really impacts what's happening in terms of the library planning. I think that it sounds like it's doing what you also agreed is a necessary thing of giving the short-term, refuge to people. And yes, I agree, like, let's go up to the Board of Selectmen and say, yo, what's your plan for the future? But I'm not sure I understand how that connects to what should happen with this library.
May I say something?
Yes.
Now that I got that glitch straightened out, I'm sorry. I agree with both of you. I don't think this is really should be an issue of contention because there is not extra space being allocated for the purpose of being a shelter. I think Marianne was pointing out that the library can help in certain circumstances. And I know there was a comment recently about not building a shelter with some books. And I just think that's really backwards because we are going to have a library which can provide some assistance to people. It's not going to solve all the problems. Those problems, I agree with you, Leslie, they're huge and they're a town problem. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to do what we can within the scope of the library. And I think actually, just to go back to Kat's point, there could be some ways that the library could be cooperating and helping the town, including with resilience. For example, at town meeting, there was at that meeting, there was a vote to have community gardens, and it was voted to be funded behind town hall. Well, if the library ends up being built behind town hall, it would be an obvious natural combination to have those gardens in some way connected with the library, and that does contribute to resilience. And I don't think it's going to be all or nothing. It's going to be a lot of people contributing their ideas and their talents. So I'm sure there are other ways that could be suggested for cooperation, but that's one that occurs to me right now. Thank you.
Kat, did you have your hand up again? Okay, you're muted. Okay. You're muted, Kat.
Sorry, I guess
That's
I
okay.
unmuted and then remuted. I want to agree with what Carolyn was saying and also say, just for the record, I would not support having an emergency shelter in the library. I wasn't imagining that a project of that scope at all. And in fact, on the Board of Health, we've looked into this a little bit and we've found that having an emergency shelter in a town and run by the town is an extremely complicated and difficult procedure, and it involves risk and liability and other things that are usually best left to, for example, the Red Cross. So I think that actually probably we all agree on this quite a bit more than we think.
I will just say that the library trustees and I have never once said that the library would be an emergency shelter. We've said a place where people can get cool when it's hot, warm when it's cold. They would have access to water, running water, because it would be, I really hope we're not building a library that doesn't have running water, and that it would be a charging station where they could charge their devices and have access to information if the power is out. So I see Penny's hand up.
I just got all excited about the prospect of solar powered outdoor showers. Never mind.
In our library of things, we could have a solar powered camping shower bag. Do people know what those are? So it's a bag that you can fill with water and then you hang it up in the sun during the day and it gets warm and then you can take a shower at night. So we could have something like that if there was a call for it. Let's see, Kat, I think your hand's up from the last time. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Let's see, so I'll just read. Jamie Donta said, I would add resiliency in the face of public health issues as well. Many of us are working from home now, making power and internet that much more valuable. Let's see. And Jeannie Brown says composting toilets forever. She and I will have a little talk. There is probably a better way to do composting toilets than we do it here in the current library. And I would be willing to learn about them. But ours is a little bit sketchy right now. So Jeannie, I'm willing to talk to you about it. So, okay. 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 All right. Okay. So, let's see. Mike Vinsky has a question.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, my video is not working here right now, but not a question particularly. I apologize for dropping in on this meeting so late. I couldn't attend the first part of it, but once again, I think it's important that a point of view be known, and I don't want to be beating a dead horse from last night or anything like that, but I think the idea that this library is going to be too big a library to be appropriate size for Shutesbury is a point that needs to be made again, and the fact that the size of it is going to be very expensive, and there's a portion of the population in Shutesbury that can't afford additional increases in their taxes. So I just I don't know how to get that point across, but I think it needs to be made on a continuous basis. I don't feel that that point is being seriously considered, and I just want to make that. I just want to establish that. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thanks, Mike. Duly noted. So I had Kat's hand first and then Carolyn's.
I just wanted to respond to that by saying maybe we could keep an open mind and wait to say that we can't afford it when we get the estimate.
I have a feeling when we get the estimate, it's going to be too
Mike,
late.
you're jumping in. If you could raise your hand. Carolyn was next.
I completely agree, because that is how the design process is set up. That first we have to agree on what we need, and then it gets spec'd out, and then we figure out the cost. But I do want to just mention, Marianne, I don't know if you want to get into this, but in a private conversation, I had asked you really how much is it going to cost people, because I think there's a lot of unknowns here and a lot of fear of the unknown. And I don't know if you want to get into what you thought was the typical cost, but I was surprised to hear it was much lower than I had expected. And, I realize this opens up a whole tangle of issues here, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation, but maybe just as a reassurance of what you thought the average could be. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, I think, in that conversation, all I was really doing was sort of referring to what the averages were the last time. And we can't really speculate about what the cost will be this time, because we don't know, the cost per square foot. And so we can't really guess how much it's going to be this time. I know that, last time around, when we were asking the town to borrow $1.1 million, it was going to cost me about $75 a year. And I live in an average price house that's valued around $250,000 or assessed around $250,000. And that was when we were going to borrow $1.1 million. I don't know. I can't say that we're going to borrow $1.1 million this time. We don't know the total project cost. We don't. And then this time we have the state paying a higher percentage. We have more than $520,000 already saved. So, and we don't know how the town would approach paying for it. Is the town going to use some capital stabilization and some free cash? Is the town going to borrow the whole amount? We don't know the answers to those questions. So, I can't make any guesstimates like that.
Okay, well, even that information is helpful. I know that you have a great command of these details, and I just wanted to hear up to this point if you had anything to say about it yet.
Yeah, okay. So let's see. So Kat, is your hand a new hand? No? Okay. Mike Minsky, is your hand a new hand, or is that the same hand you had up before?
No, it's a new hand. So then can you walk me through the process of how we're going to determine how much this is going to cost? I mean, my take on this is that we're going to get the grant in January or February, and then the designers are going to take all these inputs and they're going to put together a design with a cost sometime in February or March. And then that cost will be established. And then in April, we're supposed to be voting on that amount. So when we're talking about, well, let's wait and see how much it's going to cost to see whether we can afford it or not. So we're going to be at the end of March, a month before town meeting, and we're going to try to decide whether we can afford it or not. What if we decide we can't afford it? Then what's going to happen? I would assume that we go back to the designers and go, okay, we need to make this less expensive. And you're going to do that in a matter of a month. This whole MBLC process with this small library program is already flawed because it's not determining the cost nor the size of the library until way down the road when it's impossible to make any changes to it. I'm ready to hear what the plan's going to be, but from what I see, it doesn't look like that this is a reasonable avenue to pursue with getting a new library.
I didn't really hear any new questions from you, Mike. And I think, so no, there won't be a design phase in the spring. The design phase is going to be after town meeting approves the project, if we get the grant. So we'll have a cost estimate before town meeting. The cost estimate will be based on the square footage, which is what the cost estimate is always based on. It'll be based on that, and then we'll go into the design phase. We'll continue with our fundraising. So it's going to be, a year and a half before we break ground, and then another year before the building is finished. There's a lot of time for fundraising. And so, yeah, it's a moving target, and quite frankly, it always is. That's why when you develop a project like this, You add things like contingencies and escalations into your plan. So you plan for change orders, you plan for price changes in the marketplace, and you add those all into your estimates. People doing municipal construction have experience with municipal construction, and they're good at figuring out how much a project costs. So town meeting is going to decide whether or not this project works. There isn't anybody who can decide before town meeting whether or not town meeting will support the project. So we can't know if it's too expensive until town meeting votes. And we can't know what the price tag is until we are awarded the grant, if we're awarded the grant. Leslie, did you have another question?
Yes. I think what Mike is trying to say, and what I've been trying to say for some weeks now, is that the square footage of the library that goes in with the building program is the determinant of the ultimate cost. So we're trying to give voice to people who are concerned about a larger library that is going to cost them more money.
Mary Ann, we can't hear you.
Can't hear me? Can you
Now
hear me
we
now?
can. Yes.
Okay. I have to be looking right at it. So I think, let's see. Jen Davies, do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I just want to respond to that. Like, I think that everybody who's been working on this has been super respectful of the concerns that people have on both sides. I mean, frankly, I want a much bigger library than what you're proposing, but I understand that there are concerns by other people in town about what the cost of that is going to be. I don't think this is a willy-nilly, like, let's do the best we can do. I think there's been consideration for that. And we have nothing else in town. I mean, I can bore you with the stories of me and Linda Privolo doing designs for a library that actually was going to have a cafe in it. So somebody, people could stop by and sit outside and have coffee and all that kind of thing. I mean, our town has nothing. And as I get older, I want a place where I can go and socialize and see other people. And it's terrifying to me to think that, here I am in this little tiny town with nothing going on. And, I need to drive to Amherst to see other humans. So yes, I want something with a big wraparound porch and rocking chairs and every other kind of thing. It's not, so I understand and I hear your points about being concerned for people. I also feel that concern for people who cannot potentially not pay any kind of increase that might result from this, but understand that this is a middle ground. This is trying to respond to what everybody's needs are. And I hear yours, so hear mine. I want it to be bigger, but I respect the work that the team has done to come up with the proposal that they've made, and I appreciate it very much.
So I see Penny and I see Gail. And then I see Jamie Donta, and then if we have time after that, we'll take Mike Minsky again.
I just wanted to say economies of scale. If you scale back, you may be losing some of the economies that have been built into this design or program design.
Gail, do you want to ask something or make a comment? Gail Fleischicker?
Yes, I'm wondering if when this is presented at town meeting, we will have a dollar estimate of costs. Will we at that point be able to answer Kat's question about the town proposing that X part of that will come from capital funds, X comes from free cash, and the consequences to any tax if we were to borrow the remaining would those be known quantities or at least estimated quantities at that point?
Yes.
Our plan for town meeting is to ask for a not to exceed figure. So we'll have our best informed estimate based on square footage, finishes, the site. And then we'll add in escalations and contingencies and then have a not to exceed figure. So we'll say that we're asking for this, so here's the total project cost. This is what we have. This is what we need. That's what we'll be asking for. And then the finance committee will, and the town treasurer, our financial team, will make a recommendation based on the town's resources for how they think we should pay for it. And that's what town meeting will vote on.
Excellent.
And so I'm not going to speak for the finance committee and the treasurer and the town administrator who work with our town budget on a regular basis. They're the ones who know what our resources are. And we'll also, between now and then, we continue fundraising.
Right.
And we, we'll have, so we'll have a pretty solid not to exceed figure that we can vote for. And then it can't cost the town more than that because that's what the town will have agreed to pay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Donta, you were next.
I just wanted to speak briefly, if I could, to the money that the library saves people. We've talked a lot about, taxes and how much we all spend in taxes, and no one wants to spend more on taxes. But we also, many of us spend money on things like books and movies, entertainment. And I've brought 2 kids up here. And from when they were born until when they were in preschool, I was unemployed. I was home with the kids all the time. I couldn't afford daycare, so I stayed home with the kids. And the library, besides saving my sanity, honestly, saved me gas to go anywhere with my kids other than the center of town. It saved me the stack of books that they got every time we went up there. All the Harry Potter movies, like we've not spent so much money because the library was there with services that we needed. And having a place like that saved me all of that was just amazing. And my kids are better for it.
So Mike Pinsky, you were next, and then after that it'll be Carolyn.
Who's up?
You, Mike Pinsky.
You cut out there a little bit. There's a reason a lot of people live in Shutesbury is because of the fact that it's not Amherst, it's not Northampton, it's not Springfield. It's a small, quaint little town that doesn't have a lot of services. And the fact that we're trying to build something that is going to be inappropriately large for a small town that is basically historically been a relatively independent area. I mean, I grew up in Amherst. Shutesbury was always the town where you could basically get away to. And now it's turning into the town that I want to get away from. It's just, it's turning into a bureaucratic government. It's just getting to the point where everybody needs to have their needs met 100% all the time. And it's getting quite different from what it has been in the past. And that's, granted, if that's what the town wants to do, that's what the town wants to do. But you got to keep in mind that there are people that have moved to Shutesbury because they want a small town experience that doesn't have a lot of services, especially when all these things are located a matter of miles away in Amherst or Northampton or whatever. So the fact that this is going to be the the crowning jewel in Shutesbury is great, except there's a lot of people that aren't interested in that and don't expect that.
Did you have your hand up again, or is it up from the last time? Jamie Donta, your hand is still up. Is that just a mistake? Okay. Okay, and Carolyn, do you have a question?
I do. Actually, I was going to just say that I agree very strongly with Jamie. One of the main purposes for a public library is to share resources and save everybody money that they would normally be spending individually for all this stuff. And if you just think about even how much you might spend on dinner and a movie for two, that could end up being what you would be contributing in your taxes every year from one evening. And I don't agree that the purpose that many people live in this town in order to not have services. I mean, I think there are ways to provide services and to keep everybody's needs in mind. And nobody's going for the Cadillac version of anything. I think unfortunately, I actually believe that having visited Irving may have given people the wrong impression, because we all know that we're not going to have a library like Irving. We don't have the same kind of tax base with industry here. But what we could learn and still should be learning from Irving, as well as the other libraries, is what is possible and can we scale it to our town? And I know that Marianne and the trustees are working very hard to do that. So thank you.
So Jen, do you have another question, or is your hand up from before?
No, this is a new one. I just want to make a real quick point, which is looking at your circulation statistics compared to all of the towns around us, I think show as an amazing amount of support from the town for the services that the library offers. I mean, it's amazing. Like, it's amazing. Our town loves our library, and they'll love it even more when there's more things to do there. And I was like, I think we owe it to everybody. The next round of kids and the next round of people who can't easily get into Amherst. That's it.
Great. Jamie, is your hand up again, or is that up from before? That's up from before. Okay. So, so somebody in the chat said, I don't think you can make generalizations about why people live here, and inappropriately sized is in the eye of the beholder. And it's not reasonable to expect taxpayers in other towns to pay for services so we can use them. So Kat, you had a question?
It's not a question. I just wanted to make a remark as the chair of the Board of Health. I want everybody to know that Marianne has worked very closely with the Board of Health throughout this pandemic. She has been exemplary in instituting really safe procedures and being able to continue to provide library materials and services throughout the pandemic safely, contact-free. It is incorrect and unfair to say that the library was unsafely kept open during the pandemic. The library building was closed for many months, and Mary Ann labored in the vineyards to keep library materials and services coming to us. And I, for one, am extremely grateful. Thank you, Mary Ann.
My pleasure. I needed something to do. So, okay. All right. Okay, well, it's 1:05. We've been at this for more than an hour. And we had a long meeting last night. So, so thanks everybody for coming. Let's see, the trustees meet on Sunday at 3 this week. And their meetings are always open and posted. And we'll keep working on it. So thank you so much for the feedback. Have a great day. Thanks, Penny. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.